And sort of one of Dad's sayings was, well, what's the worst that can happen? And I think that kind of gives you permission to fail. And off I went to Heathrow Airport to meet somebody from this company and joined them and spent the next 6 years working in all kinds of companies. Pick a problem that you really care about. Doesn't matter if it's a giant problem or a tiny problem, where it's something where you think there's a better way to do something. Mm-hmm. And then just take one small step.
Welcome to this week's episode of A Beginner's Guide to Being a Grown-Up, where I interview Louise Hill, the CEO and founder of GoHenry, the money app helping kids to learn about earning, saving, spending and investing. We go on a journey with her from an early passion for languages to the shop floor, and also get her advice on all things problem solving. Louise, tell me a little bit about your journey into adulthood.
Gosh, that feels like it's a lifetime ago now. But, right, well, I grew up in Lowestoft, which lots of people always think is in Norfolk. It's actually right on the border of Norfolk and Suffolk, and it is Suffolk. Great childhood by the sea. We lived about 2 roads back from the sea, so I think I spent a lot of my childhood on the beach or by the beach. Went to school. Absolutely fell in love with languages. I think that had a lot to do with my teacher, like so many people. If you have an inspirational teacher, you get enthused for a subject. And went to university to study languages. Absolutely focused on, can I become a professional interpreter?
Okay.
And I look back now and think, good grief, why on earth did you think that was a good plan? But I mean, I did. I did A-level languages, then I did 4 years of a degree in specialised translation and interpreting as languages. Managed to get a job at the EU, did it for about 3 months and just thought, oh, I hate this. And, you know, when I look back now and think, I guess what I've learned about myself now, what I like, what I'm good at, where I get joy from, sitting in a booth, listening to somebody, and although there is creativity in how you translate and how you translate that into another language, that was never for me. So that was kind of from day one into adulthood.
So you were in the EU. Where were you based?
Brussels.
So you're in Brussels, 3 months in, the thing you've been dedicated to for most of your teenage years and adult life so far, and you're like, I don't like this.
Yeah.
So
can you imagine the phone call to my dad?
Tell you what,
I'm coming home.
So what did you do? So what was your journey from there?
Do you know what? One of the things I realise now that my parents gave me, they always used to tell us to have a go at stuff.
Okay.
And sort of one of Dad's sayings was, well, what's the worst that can happen? And I think that kind of gives you permission to fail. It gives you permission to try stuff, but it also gives you permission to fail, because it's saying, well, you know, the worst that happens, it goes wrong. That went wrong for me. It wasn't the right career move for me. I came home. I went back to Lowestoft. I started applying for other jobs. I got a graduate fast track scheme with the House of Fraser, and went to Howells of Cardiff with 2 other graduates to spend the next 2 years there, kind of working through every single department in a retail giant, which House of Fraser was at that point in time. You know, in security, in the legal team, in the comms team, on the floor in some of the departments, window merchandising. Learned a huge amount, and really what I realised I loved about that was there's this cliche that retail is detail, and it absolutely is. But you could change things and see the impact. You could change something today and literally the same afternoon see the impact that made on sales, whether that was moving something or putting a new window display in or structuring the department slightly differently.
So the two ends of the spectrum, from kind of not talking to anyone and sitting in a booth to being surrounded by the general public.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yes. And I mean, that was, I guess, part of why realizing that interpreting was not going to be for me. I thrive on people and people interactions and working with people. I do.
So you're in Cardiff in one of the House of Fraser stores. That's a big leap from there to starting a bank for children.
Yes, it is.
Tell me a little bit about that journey, because they're two very different things.
They are, yeah. So I worked for the House of Fraser for 2 years. I absolutely loved it. I have to be blunt, it was very badly paid.
As retail generally is.
I made it to the dizzy heights of floor manager. And I was running the fashion floor and the hairdressing salon, and we had the cafe, and we had haberdashery and fabrics. A big area. I couldn't even afford to buy a car. Couldn't think about being able to afford to buy a house. And I looked upwards in the organisation, and there wasn't one woman senior to floor manager in the organisation. And I just thought, I have to move on. And I answered an ad. This will sound ridiculous to younger people. I answered an ad that was in the back of the Sunday Times, advertising for graduates with a couple of years work experience who could speak at least one other European language. Well, I could speak French and German. To go and join an American management consultancy that was opening offices across Europe. And off I went to Heathrow Airport to meet somebody from this company and joined them. And spent the next 6 years working in all kinds of companies across Europe. Actually going into the companies, working with we would call them the client, to identify either efficiencies or savings, and then staying with them and working with their teams to deliver those improvements or savings, so that they could really see that they went through to the bottom line. It was definitely not the write a shiny report style of consulting. And again, I loved that. I really loved that. I loved having to go into a business, really quickly get under the skin of that business and kind of identify what the key levers were and what the things that would make a difference. And then again, work with the people there who were usually the team, the people on the floor were usually the people who could tell you what was wrong and what needed to change. And so often it was simply taking that up to the directors and going, your team actually know what needs to happen. Can we now work with them and do this? So, that was, I loved doing that. The last job I did with them we were brought in by Next, who had just bought Grattan, which was a great big thick home shopping catalogue at the time. And Next wanted to launch Next Directory, which was a kind of a transformation for the home shopping industry.
And everybody of our age remembers that Next Directory arriving on their doorstep, don't they?
Absolutely. It was the first real B2C home shopping and then e-commerce business in the UK, and it completely transformed the way people shopped from home. And I led that project for the consultancy, based in Bradford for about a year and a half. I still remember having a nightmare where, the nightmare that so many people have about standing up thinking in their dream that they're standing up in public and talking to an audience, and they look down and they have no clothes on. Well, my dream was I looked down and my suit was made of the Novotel bedspread. Because I'd been staying in the Novotel hotel for a year and a half in Bradford.
It's not glamorous, is it?
No, it wasn't glamorous, but it was great fun. It was incredibly hard. We literally, the day we went live, we literally changed all of the logistic routes, all of the shipments, all of the carriers, all of the dispatch overnight. Literally, I flicked a switch at midnight one night and didn't get much sleep that night, but it worked.
And so that kind of, in that consultancy space, it sounds like what you did, you took obviously your languages and your knowledge from a language perspective, which was your passion, everything you'd learned about the fact that at the House of Fraser, that actually the people who probably know what's going on are the people on the floor with the clients, kind of combining that into be able to find solutions.
Yeah. Yes. And what happened as a result of that was that it was right at the time where e-commerce was starting to become a thing. I mean, it's literally when the internet stopped downloading pixel by pixel onto your computer screen and started to load fast enough that you could have a transactional website. And so I was lucky enough, all of the e-com players who wanted to launch, and then the bricks and mortar retailers in the UK who realised they needed to be part of this as well. They were, of course, looking for people who knew home shopping, knew this emerging e-commerce thing. And so I got to work with John Lewis. I got to work with the White Company. I got to work with Hotel Chocolat. I went to Scotts of Stowe as operations director. I joined a group of e-com companies that often nobody's ever heard of, but the Innovations group. They used to do a lot of the catalogues that would fall out of your Sunday paper.
Oh, yes.
Out of the supplements. So they did a number of charity catalogues for the big charities. All the London museums, they did their catalogues. And then they did the innovation report, all kinds of things. And I ran operations for them. But always in the operations side of it. So always I always think of it as the systems, the processes and the people, and how you have to build those teams and get people engaged with making things as slick and efficient and seamless as possible so that you're really servicing the customer well. Yeah.
So obviously a wealth of experience in kind of like really practical business. And I know you've got a real passion for, and that GoHenry came from a real passion for kind of children's financial education and empowerment. So where did that come from? What was it that was driving you to kind of take a left turn, as it were?
My kids. It literally a kind of sideways step. But briefly, and whilst I was working for other e-com players, I launched my own e-commerce catalogue website with the ex-buying director from the Innovations group, and we ran that for 4 years. But no, as a mum, I suddenly got faced with the fact that my brother had bought both of my kids the little tiny square iPods for Christmas. I'd given them the login to my iTunes account, and all I can say is they were having a great time. They were downloading music left, right and centre. They were sort of 7 and 9, 8 and 7 and 9, maybe 8 and 10 at the time. And I was just trying to figure out, as a parent, how on earth do I make them understand that this is spending money? You know, that it's every time they click, there's a bill. And at that time, iTunes used to email you an invoice for every single download. So I started printing those out on the home printer and using the magnet on the fridge to attach them to the fridge. And then on a Saturday morning, I'd kind of go, well, I know I would normally give you £5, but guess what? You've spent £4.20 on iTunes, so you're only getting 80p. And they were not very happy. But it was really important to me that they understood that money has to come from somewhere. And you know, they when they click, they're making a decision. And I started talking to other parents about it, really to start with, half as a joke, but half trying to find out what trick was I missing, what were other parents doing to solve this. And all these stories came out about, you know, a little girl who'd bought loads of hair ornaments for her little pony online that was using her mum's credit card, somebody who'd run up a big gaming bill. My favourite one still, and I have told this 100 times, a little boy who'd spent £600. He was 11 years old, no concept that £600 really was a lot of money, on what he thought was a little model car. And it arrived on the back of a flatbed truck and got lifted off with a crane onto his mother's driveway.
Oh my God.
So what I realised, I guess, was we'd left kids behind. We were shopping online. Actually, so were the kids. You know, people didn't realise it, I don't think, but children had started to do stuff online. And we were still giving them cash. And how were we going to teach them? You know, how were they going to learn to use money the way we were now using money? We already all had debit cards. In fact, when we first launched GoHenry, the month that we launched GoHenry, which was November 2012, when we launched in the UK, Tesco's, WH Smith and McDonald's, I believe, were the only three places that had could take contactless payments. That's sort of the time that it was. So yes, that was where it came from, and I paired up with two of the dads who were good friends of mine who had kids at the same school as my kids, and we started trying to figure out first of all, is there somebody else out there already doing it, and then if there isn't, can we come up with a business model? Can we figure out what we would need to do? And can we raise enough money to go and build this?
And clearly you did.
Yeah, we did.
So how many customers do you now have on GoHenry, roughly?
In the UK, we've helped about 2.2 million kids.
Wow.
As a group, because we're quite a bit bigger now, just over 6 million.
That's amazing. That must feel really good to help kids really start to understand the value of money and how it works. And yes, absolutely. I mean, it does. We talk to customers all the time, and when you really, I guess the point where the thing I take most pleasure from, let me try and think how to say this. The thing I take most pleasure from is when we've spoken to a customer and they've told us this has changed their child's behaviour, or even better, it's changed the way they interact with money because they've watched their child's behaviour change. And often that is because we encourage kids to save some of their pocket money. Watching their child save and work towards a savings goal. And then we'll get feedback from a parent that they've never saved in their life before. It's always been paycheck to paycheck, but they've watched their child do it and have started doing it for themselves. And there's one customer who she's very kindly allowed us to share her story. Her son wanted to go to Disneyland Paris, and she's a single mum with two boys, and she just said, sweetheart, I can't begin to afford that. And bless him, he decided he was going to save up and pay for his ticket, and started saving really hard and doing odd jobs and doing things for other people to earn money to go onto his GoHenry card, into his savings pot. And she was just so thrilled by that. She started doing the same thing.
And you know what I'm going to tell you? They went to Disneyland Paris and they sent us a postcard. It was just
wow.
amazing,
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah,
I mean, and it's those stories that are so powerful.
yeah,
Kind of really,
yes.
from little acorns, as they say, of you putting up the invoices from iTunes on the fridge and saying, guys, come on, you've got to pay for the things that you spend, into something that's helped over 6 million kids really understand, and their parents kind of understand how money works. So if I take you back to that 18-year-old self who'd just finished in school, doing multiple languages, very clear what she wanted to do in terms of being a translator, off to university to study translation.
Yep.
What would she recognise in you today?
I think the underlying drive to solve problems. I almost said fix things. Solve problems, build things that don't exist, and probably persuade other people to come and help me do that. Because that, when you're making me think about it, that's kind of applied to stuff I did as a child. It applied in retail. It applied in it applies today. Yeah.
And I remember, the keys, I'm guessing, to your success, which is bringing people with you.
Yeah, that's so important. That's so important. You can't ever know everything yourself. You have to persuade people. You have to listen to people and bring people with you, and surround yourself with people often who know an awful lot more than you do. Yeah. So I think probably my 18-year-old self would recognise that. Yeah.
So what would she be absolutely blown away by?
I've got to say the fact that I built GoHenry. To some extent, well, no, not to some extent. I regularly kind of look around and think, good grief, how did that happen? It does. It amazes me sometimes.
Yeah.
But I started GoHenry. I was 47, divorced, 2 kids, big mortgage, and absolutely no background in financial services. But yeah, so I think that would probably, for an 18-year-old me, that would probably have been a really.
Yeah, which, to be fair, given your direction of travel at 18, is not surprising, really. That
Maybe so.
My guess is as well, and when we were prepping for the call, you said that you've been at Downing Street this week. She'd probably be quite surprised you'd managed to go to Downing Street, and that's not your first time, is it? So I think she'd probably be amazed by that as well.
Yes, yeah, possibly, yes.
So through that journey, there must have been times where, and you touched on it when you kind of came back from Brussels, rang your dad, came back from Brussels, that actually your parents gave you permission to fail, for want of a better phrase.
Yeah.
What's the biggest kind of failure that's kind of formed you and helped you to have the tenacity to do what you've done?
Well, I mentioned briefly that I set up an e-com business, and I did that. So it was with the ex-buying director from the Innovations Group, and I'd been the operations director there. We knew the Innovations Group was about to be bought by the Burton Group, which then split into Arcadia and Debenhams. And so rather than wait to find out if we had jobs or where we might end up, we kind of seized the bull by the horns and launched our own e-commerce business. And we ran it for 4 years. We ran it on a shoestring. We were making a profit. We turned the final year. We turned over about £5 million. We made a small profit on that, and we were paying ourselves salaries. There were 2 other people involved in the business, so it really was run on a shoestring. And we sort of thought, oh well, this is working. Let's scale it. Let's reach more customers. Let's send out more catalogues. It was in the days, it was 1998 to 2002, where you still mailed catalogues. And then suddenly realised we'd not built anything in to allow us to scale it. So there wasn't, if I'd stepped away from the business to go and try and find funding, the whole thing would fall over.
Right.
We didn't have enough money in the bank account to hire somebody in to take over some of my workload so that I could go and do that. And it really was one of those, oh my God, why didn't we think about that moments? And we were lucky. We managed to sell it. I was being asked some questions a month or so ago, and the interviewer actually said to me, "Oh, you're a successfully exited entrepreneur," and I said, "Yeah, can we just be really clear about this? We sold it for £1."
Right.
We sold it for £1 and basically a job for the two of us and the two people who were in the business for a year to a retail group. That was at the time, I was furious. I was so upset with myself. I couldn't believe I hadn't looked ahead and thought about that. So yeah, that was, in my eyes then, a huge failure.
Yeah.
Of course, when I look back now, slightly less annoyed about it, what I realise is it was 1998, 2002. In that time, I had my two kids. So one was born in 98, one was born in 2001. Running my own business let me work whatever hours I needed to. So that could be midnight till 3 a.m. if that's when I happened to be awake or the children were asleep, more importantly. And also, it taught me such a lot because when it came to figuring out what to do and how to start GoHenry, I was absolutely crystal clear. We would bring enough money in to give us enough of a runway to be able to build what we wanted, and we would partner, because we had to plug into all of the financial systems and banking systems. We would partner with, I've always called it world-class partners, so not small companies that then 2 years later, if we'd got a bit of traction, we would have to swap out and reconfigure everything. We started with world-class partners, and we were lucky enough to be able to convince some of the big financial services giants to work alongside us with what originally was a PowerPoint deck that I would arrive and wave at them. So a failure, but you learn from them. Every time you make a mistake, you learn from it, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to slightly challenge you on you were lucky that the partners wanted to play with you, because I think we make our luck, and probably your experience up to that point of all of the different things you've done has probably made you a much luckier person in that position. So making those big decisions, there's some big decisions to sell a business for £1, or even if you sold it for more, it's a big decision in your life, especially, with young kids and, not knowing what you're going to do next, and throwing it all in for GoHenry as well is a huge decision to go, as you said, do something in a space you've never worked in before, doing something you've never done before. Out of all the decisions that you've made so far, what would you say is your best decision?
If I put the obvious one of my two kids,
Yes,
that to one
that's
side.
a given.
I'll put that one to one side. It has to be jumping off the cliff and starting GoHenry. It does. It was scary as heck. And anybody who works for themselves, runs their own business, doesn't matter whether it's a one-person band or it grows to be something the size of GoHenry, it's scary as heck.
Yeah.
And but it was the best decision I ever made. It's we've been live in the UK since 2012, so that's 13 years in. Can I do my maths? Yeah, 13 years in. I was going to say I've loved every minute of it. Boy, there have been some hideous moments involved in it. No, I have loved all of it. It's been such a ride. It's been such a joy to and I'm going to use the phrase, be able to be part of building this, because the teams, the people who joined early on, we still have the very first person I ever hired, a lady called Ruth. She's still with us today. She's now got some very grand title. She's global senior vice president of customer support. Works across all of our US operations and UK operations. We've got loads of people who've been with us 10 and 11 and 12 years. But we've also got lots of youngsters in our customer support centre. Those teams, massive part of what we've built. And I'm hugely proud of them and everything they've contributed to where we've got today.
Brilliant. Amazing. And I think there's a theme for people that, the guests that I interview, that actually the best decisions are frequently the stuff that's really scary.
Yeah, I think that's probably right.
And during everything that you've done, changing career very early on in your career to going into consultancy to starting GoHenry, I'm sure you've been given a lot of advice over the years, some good, some not so good. What's the best piece of advice you've been given that you ignored?
Oh, well, that's really easy. Stick to what you know. Because quite clearly I didn't. Quite clearly I didn't. And yet that was my aunt, actually, one of her mantras: stick to what you know, then you'll always be safe. But I didn't take that safe advice. I talk a lot in the company, and if anyone in the company listens back to this, they'll laugh. I talk about having a go. That's where the first part of the name came from. It's having a go.
Okay.
And it anchors back to what I was telling you right at the beginning about my dad saying, well, what's the worst that can happen? Have a go, try it. The worst thing that can happen is it goes wrong and you have to start again. Yeah.
And I think that kind of stick to what you know. There's a and I'm really bad at remembering quotes, but there's a quote about, ships are safer in harbour, but it's not what they're designed for.
I've not heard that one before, but yes,
it would have been safer to stay doing what you were doing.
Yeah, it would.
But that's not what you were destined to do, because you wanted to go off and break things and change things.
Yes.
So one of the things we ask all of our guests is to set a challenge for the listeners. And we do also ask the listeners to tell us if they've taken up the challenge. We've had some very interesting challenges from our guests in the last few weeks. So, Louise, what would the one thing that you would challenge our guests be?
You did warn me about this question, so I put some thought into it, because otherwise I think there might have been a very long gap whilst I racked my brains for what that challenge would be. I think it is pick a problem that you really care about. Doesn't matter if it's a giant problem or a tiny problem. Where it's something where you think there's a better way to do something. Mm-hmm. And then just take one small step. So I'm just realising as I say that Michael Mosley did a whole series called One Small Step, didn't he, in terms of health improvements. Mm-hmm. But just take one step towards exploring how you might fix it, or how you might change it, or how it might be write to your MP or put something on LinkedIn. Or I don't think people have to have the answers. I don't think they have to have the perfect solution. Mm-hmm. But one step towards finding a better way to do that.
Brilliant. So find a problem, no matter how big or small, that you care about, that you want to do something about, and just take a step towards finding a way to solve it.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So listeners, there you go. You've got your challenge for the week.
And I'd love to hear.
Yes, we will definitely tell you if people come back and tell us. So we're at the final question.
Yes.
And it's obviously called The Beginner's Guide to Being a Grown-Up. Although I'm convinced we're all still making it up. So as you have learned over the years from everything that you've experienced, what's the one piece of advice that you would put into the guide if you could?
I think it's kind of going back to what we've been talking about today. Don't let a lack of prior knowledge or experience stop you from doing something you think is important. So there's transferable skills, of course, matter, but you can learn as you go. In fact, nowadays there are more tools, more access to learning stuff incredibly quickly and easily than there ever have been. You can learn as you go. You can always ask other people and keep asking those questions till you get a sensible answer. But yeah, don't let a lack of prior knowledge stop you doing what you want to do.
Brilliant. So don't let lack of prior knowledge stop you. I love that. That's great. Because I think the reality is we all have no knowledge of the things we can learn, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Everybody's at a position where they don't know before they know.
Yes, exactly.
So, if you never try to learn something new, you won't learn anything. So I think that's fantastic advice. So thank you. Louise, it's been an absolute pleasure to learn a little bit more about your journey today, about your career pivot in Belgium, and about the journey to GoHenry and what drove you to start it, and the amazing impact that it has on those clients and their parents. So thank you so much for joining us today. I know the listeners will have really enjoyed listening to you today and learning about your story.
Thanks, Sam. It's been really enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of A Beginner's Guide to Being a Grown-Up. If you enjoyed it, please like, follow and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. If there's someone who inspires you that you'd like me to interview, you can find me on LinkedIn, Instagram and TikTok. In the meantime, enjoy being a grown-up.